10,000 years ago, beside a lagoon in what is now northern Kenya, a group of people died where they fell. One man had been struck in the head, another had a stone blade embedded in his skull. Several bodies carried injuries from arrows, clubs, or sharp weapons. They were not soldiers. There were no uniforms, kings, or countries to defend. These people lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering food, yet someone had attacked them. Was this simply murder? Or were archaeologists looking at one of humanity's first wars? Humans had been capable of violence for an extremely long time, but one killing is not a war. A fight between two people is not a war. Even a massacre does not automatically prove that two communities were at war. Warfare requires people to cooperate, identify another group as the enemy, and attack collectively. That behavior is difficult to find in archaeology. Wooden weapons decay, bodies disappear, and a skeleton cannot tell us whether its killer acted alone, during a raid, or for an entire community. So the first war will probably never be discovered. But at one ancient cemetery, the evidence becomes difficult to ignore. More than 13,000 years ago, people buried their dead at Jebel Sahaba, near the Nile in what is now Sudan. Archaeologists recovered 61 individuals. Many had been struck by stone-tipped projectiles. Tiny fragments were still embedded in some bones. The dead included men, women, and children. At first, the cemetery was interpreted as the aftermath of one enormous battle. Then researchers examined the wounds more closely. Some had healed. Those people had survived earlier arrows or spears, lived long enough for their bones to repair, and were later attacked again. Jebel Sahaba was probably not created by one terrible day. It appears to preserve repeated violence over time, perhaps ambushes, raids, and cycles of revenge between neighboring groups. The landscape may help explain why. At the end of the Ice Age, the Nile Valley was changing. The surrounding region was extremely dry, while the river could flood violently. Reliable water, fishing places, plants, and animals may have become concentrated into narrow habitable areas. Different communities were drawn toward the same valuable landscape. But scarcity alone does not create war. People can avoid one another, trade, or cooperate. For warfare to develop, something else is needed: a strong sense of us and them, companions willing to fight together, and memories of earlier attacks. One killing could produce revenge. Revenge could cause another death. A personal dispute could become a family feud. A feud could become a raid, and repeated raids could turn neighboring communities into permanent enemies. This may be what Jebel Sahaba preserves. Not the invention of violence, but violence repeating between identifiable groups. Several thousand years later, another group died beside Lake Turkana at Nataruk. 10 of the 12 relatively complete skeletons studied there showed evidence of violent death. The bodies appear to have been left unburied near an ancient lagoon. Some researchers interpret the site as an attack on a hunter-gatherer group, although parts of that interpretation remain disputed. Nataruk may represent warfare. It may represent a raid, or it may preserve one violent encounter whose full story is permanently lost, but it challenges one simple assumption. Humans did not need cities, farms, or kings before groups could attack one another. Agriculture then changed the scale of conflict. Mobile communities could sometimes leave a dangerous area. Farmers could not easily abandon planted fields, stored grain, houses, livestock, and inherited land. Permanent settlements created permanent targets. Food could be stolen, territory could be occupied, and growing populations placed more people beside neighbors competing for the same resources. Around 7,000 years ago, the evidence becomes unmistakable at several early farming sites in Europe. At Schöneck-Kilianstetten, in what is now Germany, at least 26 people were killed and placed in a mass grave. They had suffered blunt force injuries and arrow wounds. Many lower leg bones were also deliberately broken around the time of death. This was collective violence directed against a community. Farming probably did not invent war. Jebel Sahaba and Nataruk suggest that intergroup violence existed earlier, but agriculture gave conflict something new: land that could not move, wealth that could be captured, and larger communities capable of repeated attacks. So what started the first human war? Probably not one cause, not one drought, not one stolen animal, not one ambitious leader. War may have emerged when several dangerous ingredients came together. Resources became concentrated or scarce. Territory became worth defending. Communities developed stronger group identities. An attack created grief, grief demanded revenge, and revenge was remembered by the next generation. Eventually, the enemy was no longer one killer. It was everyone who belonged to the other group. That was the transformation. Humans had long been capable of killing. War began when communities learned to kill together, and to remember another community as an enemy. We may never know where the first war was fought. Its weapons probably decayed. Its victims may have vanished. Its cause may have been forgotten before history began. But Jebel Sahaba, Nataruk, and the mass graves of early farming Europe preserve fragments of the answer. The First War was probably not declared by a king. It may have begun with fear, competition, and one death that another family refused to forgive.